It's God's grace for me to be here today. The topic I chose is malnutrition, infection, and disease. There's a lot of personal experience in this topic, and the running title is "You Are What You Eat." Malnutrition is the condition that results from taking an unbalanced diet, and which can have certain nutrients missing or in excess or in the wrong proportions, and that will bring about a condition called malnutrition. A number of different nutritional disorders then can arise as a result of this less taking of the balanced diet or overtaking of a nutrient or over-abandoning the diet. And this is the scenario in most of the world. So we have obesity or undernutrition. The World Health Organization has actually cited correcting malnutrition as the greatest single threat to the world's public health, and that if it is improved, then it is widely regarded as the most effective form of aid that can be given to any country. However, it is not sustainable. Non-specific interventions which address the immediate cause of undernutrition have actually shown to prove and to deliver the best value for money, with non-governmental organizations being involved in food delivery with brilliant results. But as I said, it is not sustainable. So malnutrition is directly or indirectly responsible for deaths of children under 5 years old, and contributes to the second death in the under 5s associated with infection amongst the children in developing countries such as Zimbabwe. And this infection causes energy loss, and this is at the same time where the child has no appetite or is vomiting and having diarrhea and having taken in even less food. At the same time, food is also restricted to a sick person. That doesn't just apply to children, even the elderly. Food is restricted under those circumstances. And this can affect the mothers. In Zimbabwe, the mother is the master farmer. She has to go out into the field to plow the field, bring the food onto the table, and if she is ill or with a sick child, those activities cannot be handled properly or effectively. All right, why do we eat? I think let's just go back to basics. Why bother eat? We eat in order to maintain what you call barrier defenses, and these can be mucosal surface membranes. It could be pHs in stomach acid. It could be gut-friendly parasites or gut-friendly microbes. But this is barrier defense. Any breach in the barrier defense will obviously lead to infection. So the role of the immune system then is to protect against infection and disease. And this involves a complex network of organs and cells that will prevent any entry into our bodies, and also it will also stop in the track the cancerous cells from occurring. So you have the innate and the adaptive immune responses. So the innate is the non-specific response to harmful substances, and it's usually the first line of defense, and this is against invading pathogens. So something has to detect that some foreign particle has entered our body, go shut it down or eliminate. If that does not occur, it means that line of defense has been bypassed, and a second line of defense called adaptive immune response will then have to take place. The key components The complement classical pathway, this is a cascade of 20 serum proteins which you can detect in the serum, and this is an effective way of eliminating pathogens in our cells, and because it promotes phagocytosis. The complement proteins do float freely in the blood, and it helps to destroy pathogens by changing the surface area of the surface of the bacteria, making it able to be phagocytosed, whereas previously it was not able to do that. This is the basis, obviously, of vaccinations, immunization, where you are expecting a long-term immunity to occur, involving the antigen-antibody specific responses, and therefore memory, which we all may be aware that in HIV and AIDS, that memory has been interfered with. So it is not present, even though most of us were given BCG at birth. In our country, for example, you are given that at birth. In other places, it's not given. But there are childhood vaccinations that we are given, and our bodies are supposed to remember that we actually have come across those infections. But once that memory has been lost, we are experiencing that disease for the very first time, and it could have fatal results. So the major mediators of these memory cells are the T and B lymphocytes. The B lymphocytes is where you get the humoral immunity or the antibodies. Don't forget the IgG, the immunoglobulin G tells you that somebody has had the infection. It could be now or it could be previously. The IgM will show you that you've got current infection. All right. The ability of the immune system then to prevent infection and disease does depend on the nutritional status of the host. If you are malnourished or if you've got poor overall nutrition, there's macronutrients missing, micronutrients missing, you are unable to mount some of the immune responses that you are supposed to do. So you need a certain level of nutrition in order to have an effective immune system. It can compromise the integrity of the immune system, and that can actually increase susceptibility to infection, which is something that you don't want. You want your immune system to be able to take care of any infection or any invader that comes into that space, eliminate it, and you move forward. Now, according to the nutrition and immunology, the protein energy malnutrition is the most common malnutrition problem that we encounter. There is insufficient intake of protein, and therefore there is no energy. And in our scenario, where a lot of our work is manual, you need that energy in order to actually work for your family. In industrialized nations, the protein energy is due to chronic disease, but usually this is in subgroups, in elderly, or those in hospitals, and some with various diseases, such as the inflammatory bowel disease or chronic renal failure and cancer. The malnutrition will affect the number of circulating T cells and also interfere with the responsiveness of these T cells to any memory, to antigen previously that they were exposed to. Right, you are what you eat. As a human being, you have to actually choose what you put in that plate and therefore what you eat. You cannot manufacture food. You are not a plant. So you have to make a conscious choice of eating the correct food. So it starts with you. Once you are a parent and you choose the wrong food, it also means your family is eating the wrong foods. So that scenario will have a rollover effect, which can be very costly. So what you want is food security at household level. So if you are not growing the food, do you have capacity to buy the food? And if you are not buying the food, have you made arrangements to ensure that you have proper food supply for the whole year? If it's in an African country, the rains are seasonal. So when the rains come and food is plentiful, you must take care to actually harvest some of the foods, dry them into vegetables that you can use at a later date. So the concept of, they call it dura, a granary or something like that, you must have that in your mind. And that concept has fallen away. That's the result why you are seeing a lot of hungry faces in Africa. The concept of dura has fallen away. You must also have the knowledge to utilize the food effectively. And some of that is not written down. It was used by our ancestors, and we did not write it down. And it's a calamity, really, that we did not write that down. As a result, we have missed out on a lot of information that can be used now in order to preserve self and generations. Okay, so malnutrition is a lack of nutritional elements necessary for human health. It could also be eating nutrient-deficient foods. And I cite in place here maize flour. I know in my part of the world, everybody thinks it's a staple food. It is not our staple food. It has never been. It is an animal feed. Our staple food have been the small grains, the finger millets. That has been our staple food. But we've fallen away from that, and we are now saying it's too laborious to grow, so let's leave it, but to our own detriment. And unfortunately, some of the small foods have got iron, have got the protein that we're actually looking for in order to correct the protein energy malnutrition, but because they are not in place, we are suffering because of our own sheer ignorance. Sometimes disease itself can prevent our bodies from absorbing the good nutrients, so repair and growth needs to take place first to bring nutrition to a baseline level before we can even counter infection and disease. Education is key, empowerment is key, and people need to be retaught what to eat, how to cook it, what combinations, and so that they can actually feed their families correctly. This doesn't just apply to Africa only. It applies to most nations where people don't know what to eat. But if you probe, you will find that the knowledge is there, but they think it's archive, or they think they are coming from a new era, and they are the era for fast foods. You are the older era for these difficult foods that you want to eat, or that you want to take us back to. Okay, the humoral antibody infinity and response is decreased. So there is a secondary protein energy malnutrition, and this is common in developed countries. It compromises the mucosal barriers, increasing susceptibility to respiratory, gastrointestinal, and urinary tract infections. In Zimbabwe, in the children 0 to 5, there is supplementation of vitamin A droplets, and this is all to try and correct the integrity of mucosal barriers. So protein energy malnutrition occurs in combination with the deficiencies in essential micronutrients such as vitamin A, zinc, copper, selenium, and magnesium. So some of that is coming from the fact that most families are actually poor and cannot feed their families. But that is not the only story. If you don't know what to grow, you don't know what to store, you don't know which foods to combine. So your poverty will lead you into insufficient child maternal care, little education for children, and multifunctioning of social injustice also will interfere with you trying to put food on that table because your situation is not stable. So malnutrition comprises of host defense, and infection can actually aggravate a previous existing deficient malnutrition state, and that can trigger through a disease process. So you may have a disease process that was silent, which is triggered by malnutrition, and that then facilitates the pathogen invasion and its propagation, which would not have been there if you were well nourished. So there is a consequence of health issues such as gastroenteritis, chronic illnesses such as HIV and AIDS, where we have seen opportunistic diseases coming up left, right, and center that have to be dealt with. And currently in Zimbabwe, diabetes is pitching. I don't know where it has come from, but diabetes is really pitching. It's a sad story. Diarrhea and other infections can cause decreased nutrient absorption and intake of food. The question is, when you give food to a child and they vomit, if you ask the mother, has your child eaten? What do you think the answer is? Just a wild guess. What is the answer? Yes. But has the child eaten? The child has not eaten. If the child has eaten and vomited, the child has not eaten, you have to start again. And usually starting again means you have to look for firewood and start to look for water to cook the food. So it's actually a challenge. So diarrhea and other infection can cause decreases in nutrient absorption and intake, and that also will affect the baseline nutritional status of that individual. We also have in place parasitic infections such as those from Giardia lamblia and other helminths, which will also compete with us for food. So we are in a sorry state. I didn't want to give this talk without mentioning of water, because for you to process the food, you must have clean water. And that clean water, when you are in a rural area, can be a challenge. We understood what a challenge that was following the cholera outbreak in 2008, where we had cholera and typhoid, both in urban and rural area. So water is necessary. It is a food and a non-food resource, but we need it, and we need it to be clean. So, and we also need access to clean water, because if the water is dirty, that may affect the type of nutrition that we will have. A lot of women do walk very long distance to fetch water, and with the advent of rural settlements, you will find that the cow, the goat, and the human are taking water from the same source. Some of it makes you cry because you don't have a solution, but that is what is there on the ground. Sanitation, the need to dispose of feces in the right place is paramount, because the feces do contain microorganisms that can contaminate water and food, notwithstanding the fact that you are sharing the same water hole with animals. So improved hygiene has to also be put into place so that people are aware that contaminated food can also cause disease. Okay, the bacterium, Haemophilus influenza, is mostly an opportunistic infection pathogen causing invasive infections, and it is found in pneumonia in children under 5 years old. This can contribute to a secondary infection. It can also modify pathogenesis and prognosis, and there's a relationship between the malnutrition, immune suppression, and the immune complex. So let's correct the malnutrition. Let's have a certain level of nutrition for growth and repair, because if we don't have that, then when infection comes or disease comes, we have nothing to fight those two infections with. In fact, the availability of antibiotics, let's realize that antibiotics will kill bacteria. It doesn't say friendly or otherwise. And because it doesn't say friendly or otherwise, it will just kill bacteria, including your friendly bacteria. So it is not a solution in its own right. Let's put the correct food in place. Let's be well nourished. In Zimbabwe and in children 0 to 5, pneumonia and malnutrition have been seen to be the two biggest killers in these children groups. Okay, infection can suppress appetite, and a lot of the time, mothers find it very difficult to feed a child who is refusing to open their mouth. The solution is to not give a solid food, give a food that is either a puree or a soup that they can take in easily and often. But we don't want that. We want to cook a small, thick porridge and give to the child, and that doesn't help. They don't want to chew is another thing, but they must take in nutrients somehow. So we have to devise ways of taking in nutrients. They can't stay on the drip in hospital because we can't afford for them to be in hospital for over a week. It's very expensive. Okay. Metabolic effects of infectious processes are accompanied by a significant reduction in food intake. There is also anorexia, and most cultures will also restrict food intake to the sick, simply because they don't want to clean up the underwear, which is going to be messed up. Well, because if they can't walk, it means you've got to take care of that patient, and you don't want to do that. It's a sad story, but that is the reality. So we restrict the diet, and then you don't go to the toilet often. You are cleaner often. Okay. Poor immune system permits rapid multiplication of invading organisms because there is nothing to check that microorganism infection. Recovery is very slow and less available to repair the damaged immune system. You are what you eat. Let's choose what we eat, and let's choose correctly. Go to that shop with a list of what it is that you are trying to put on the table for your family. It starts with the parents, translates into the children, and then passed on to generations. All right, I've got this, I call it an interesting slide. We go to the doctor for solution. There at the top, we've got repeated antibiotics. Usually the statement is, you go and try this. So you go and try. After 1 week, it did not work. You go back. And perhaps you get the antibiotic changed. But remember, you cannot leave an ecological niche empty. Something else will come and occupy it. And that it could be a yeast infection. It could be anything, making your situation even worse. So as microbiologists, we know that we don't need to have a guessing game. What we need is the original sample. We will take it to the lab, analyze it, and tell you what it is. Tell you also which antibiotic it responds to, and then you can deal with it. But it doesn't translate that far. Because when the patient goes to the doctor, they want the solution there and then. Once they go to the doctor, they are given a prescription to go to the lab and to go and buy medication. And inevitably, they go and buy medication before they go to the lab. So the microbiological picture is actually distorted. Okay. Initiation of both innate and adaptive responses involves the activation and the proliferation of immune cells. That means there is DNA replication, RNA expression, protein synthesis, which all consume energy. So you need energy for growth and repair. The invader also needs energy to grow. Who wins? So nutritional status of host will determine the outcome of the resulting infection. So let it be clear that poor overall nutrition can lead to nutritional deficiencies. Let's correct that nutrition. You are what you eat. For African countries, there is a way of measuring the impact of a nutritional intervention using insulin-like growth factor 1 instead of the anthropometric measurements. You can use that. It can be found in the serum, and you can do massive epidemiological studies with that, intervene with your nutrition, and then see the way forward. But it is not available. It's not available because it's expensive. Okay. Yeah, okay. So the conclusion here is that in this talk, there is essential minerals, essential micronutrients that you need to put on your plate, because what is a balanced diet? If you don't know what the balanced diet is, what can you put on your plate? So you need to know what the balanced diet is, choose from the balanced diet, choose the foods that you need to put on your plate, and be healthy and live long. Thank you.